Good morning. So we concluded the section of the Mishnah and the Gemara, which tells us about the conclusion of the recitation of the Haggadah, the conclusion of telling the story of the Exodus on the night of the Seder. We conclude with the following three items. The first is a recap of the essential elements of the Seder. That's what the Rebbe phrases as paragraph in Lakota Sichos. And essentially, sorry. This recap is given to us by Rabbi Gamliel in the Mishnah. And essentially, the recap is to discuss and talk about the three elements of matzah, maror, and Pesach. Pesach, matzah, maror, that's the right order. To talk about that. That's item number one as we come to the conclusion of the Haggadah, that recap. Then comes the paragraph which transitions us into Hallel. That transition paragraph begins with, in every generation, we're obligated to see ourselves as if we left Egypt. We discussed that at great length, this idea, right? That's the transition. And because this is so amazing that this Exodus is ongoing until this very day, therefore, it is our obligation to praise you, to laud you, to thank you, and so on. And then we conclude with the blessing, Baruch atah Hashem Gal Yisrael, blessed is the one who redeems Israel. That concludes the recitation of the story. But because we concluded by saying how amazing this all is, and therefore we have to praise you, we launch into the next part of the Haggadah, which is the Hallel, which half of which we say at this point. We break in the middle of Hallel. We eat our matzah, we eat our maror, we eat our sandwich, we eat our meal, and we come back to the Hallel after benching. So where we are right now, we look at the Gemara, which has these three things: the Pesach, matzah, maror, the paragraph, in every generation, Egypt's still going on, the Exodus is still going on, and therefore we have to praise you. Then the beginning of the Hallel. This is where we are right now. This is what we learned in the Gemara, and now we're going to learn the Alter B'Shulchan Aruch as it becomes codified in law. This is where we are. Okay, and then we're going to go to the Rebbe's Haggadah as he comments. This has been our program throughout this whole thing. Gemara, Halacha, Alter Rebbe's Haggadah. So that is chapter 473 in the Code of Jewish Law. We learned most of this chapter because this chapter takes us from the first cup of wine, a lot about which we learned, Kiddush, all the way through till the second cup of wine, which is where we're coming up to, right? This conclusion with the second cup of wine. So we did a lot of 473, which is where the laws of dipping is, the laws of eating the maror. Eating the maror comes. Eating the maror comes in the next chapter, not in this one. There's a part we skipped over here, which was about the maror, right? I think. Yeah. Well, we had the ingredients of the charosis in this paragraph. We had the setting of the kaira. We had all kinds of things in this paragraph, in this chapter 473. A lot of which we went through. Good morning. Okay, so now we come to the conclusion of this chapter of the Code of Jewish Law, which brings us to the conclusion of the recitation of Haggadah, which is what we're learning now. All right, Halacha 45 in chapter 473, Tov Ayin Gimel. Kishiagia lamatzazu. When you come to the paragraph which begins, matzazu, this matzah shana oichlin, which we eat, what is it for? We eat it because it reminds us, etc., etc., etc. So when you come to that paragraph, it says the halacha, tzarech lagbiya hamatzah, you have to raise the matzah. Direct quote from our Mishnah. We're going to see from the Alter Rebbe, from the Haggadah, and from the Rebbe's commentary what our custom is and how we do this. But the language of the Mishnah was to raise up the matzah. Right?
I do Haggadah with the matzah.
That's exactly what it is. Haggadah means to raise up. Lagbia, to raise up. Just if you have a whole Seder plate set up on top, Haggadah is not going to be a nice idea. A good idea. But raise it up. We're going to learn when we get to the Rebbe's Haggadah exactly what the Chabad custom is. But at least this is the custom here. It doesn't say how high to lift, so lifting it up by a centimeter is also considered Haggadah.
Right.
Yeah. So just a parenthetic before we continue, the Code of Jewish Law already told us we have to say this paragraph. You may remember that we learned last time we learned this code, this set of laws, this chapter 473, we discussed what are the essential elements of the recitation of Haggadah, and which paragraphs are essential, which ones are custom. Remember that? We discussed that. Way back, we discussed which paragraphs in Haggadah are the essential ones that come from the Mishnah instructs must be said, and which are the ones that are customary. So in the list of essential paragraphs is this, which Rabbi Gamliel says you must discuss these three things: Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Okay, so when you get to Matzah, so if like Matzah, you have to raise up the Matzah. This is an interesting detail to show it to the present, to those who present. The Mishnah doesn't say this, by the way. The Mishnah just says to raise it up. It doesn't say that anybody else has to see,
Right.
or that, or what the reason behind lifting it up is, right? But Alter was telling us you should do so that the people around you see, in line with everything we learned about
The blind person.
Okay, the blind person is coming up soon, but in line with everything we said till now about what we learned in the Rebbe's talk, this long essay about the halacha being that not just you have to feel free, but you have to demonstrate your freedom, right? So there's a whole communicative element to the Seder that everything's communicated to another. So here too, it's raised up so that everybody in the crowd can see. Shetachavav ha-mitzvah alayim. And in this way, it brings an extra added level of cherishness and endearment to the mitzvah. This comes from, it says here from the Rashbam. Interesting. I don't remember seeing that Rashbam. So I'm going to do a quick look at the Gemara on my screen here. I don't remember seeing that. Let's see. Yep. He says it straight up. You trust the Alter Rebbe. Lift up so that everybody, lift up your matzah so everybody can see, and that way it'll add endearment to the mitzvah. Okay, we're going to learn what the Chabad custom is, but at this point, it just seems just lift it up enough so that everybody can see. In theory, for example, sorry?
It's a broken matzah.
Well, you have whole ones there too. He didn't say which one to pick up. Okay, we're going to get in a second. That one too. Or let's just say only that one. Yeah, let's just say only that one. Let's go with that. We'll go with the Chabad custom soon. But let's just, looking at the code here, lifting up the matzah so that everybody can see can be very simply to remove it from either like we have it in cloth, or other circles that have it literally in like these stacked silver trays. You know, like you ever seen those boxes with like shelves for your matzah?
Yeah.
So you can just pull it out and matzah zoo, this matzah that we're eating. Why are we eating it? Because it reminds us of it, and then put it back.
Right.
That's all. Right? You have to like lift up the whole kaira.
Right.
Okay. It's best, one should, it's befitting to lift up the middle matzah, haprosa, which is broken, she nikras lachamoini, which is called the poor man's bread, as we spoke about also at length in the past. And this is the matzah he's going to use to fulfill his obligation. Remember, we learned this at great length. Which matzah is the matzah for mitzvah, and which bracha goes on which matzah. And we learned that. Yeah. But at least the primary opinion is that the broken matzah is the primary matzah of the mitzvah, because as we learned, the Torah calls it lechem oini. We had different translations in the Gemara what the word oini means. And the most basic translation is that it's poor man's bread, and a poor man eats broken bread. And thus, that's the main mitzvah of the matzah. That's the main matzah of the mitzvah, I should say. And therefore, that's the one you're going to lift up. The motion is bar lamaila, as explained earlier in this actual chapter 473, when we discussed the mitzvah of yachatz, breaking the middle matzah. There we discussed that the primary matzah with which you're going to fulfill your obligation is the broken one, and thus raise up that one. Likewise, when you get to the next paragraph, which says, this maror that we eat, what does it symbolize? It symbolizes the embitterment and so on and so forth. When you get to that paragraph, again, when we have to erase the maror, again, we will get to the Rebbe's Haggadah and see what the Chabad custom is. But as far as the law is concerned, raise the matzah. And again, la roisa lebesubim, to show it to the assembled. Interesting to note, here, the Alter Rebbe doesn't add, show it to the assembled, so that they are endeared by the mitzvah. That part's not mentioned here. You notice that? When it comes to the matzah, he says raise it and show everybody to create endearment. When it comes to the maror, it just says raise it so they can see it. Doesn't add the endearment element. Even though from Rashbam, if you look at the language in Rashbam, he lumps the two together. He says, when you get to matzah and maror, raise them up to show everybody so that the mitzvah becomes endeared to them. Rashbam puts them together. Alter Rebbe splits them. Matzah, raise, show for endearment, mara raised to show.
Mm.
Stop. Doesn't add the word for endearment.
Right.
And perhaps because it's bitter.
Right.
So we have to appreciate it, but I don't have to be endeared by it.
Yeah.
I have to recognize
To remember, recall it.
Exactly.
And not to, not to, in any way celebrate it.
Exactly.
And you can
As part of teshuvah, as part of redemption, it's important to recognize the bitter state of reality. But don't get attached to it.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it, know its existence, but the matzah, which is the humility that brings us out, that is to be endeared. That's to be appreciated, to be celebrated. The pressures, you have to recognize them. The stress and the failures, even, one have to recognize. But don't get overindulged in it. That's not good.
Absolutely brilliant from a psychological point of view. Never adopt the victim mentality.
Exactly.
That we left Egypt with, and because of God's outstretched hand.
That's right. Is the word catharsis? Catharsis?
Cathartic.
There's this cathartic itch people have to want to be overly attached to their state of misery
Yeah.
and the state of failure.
Exactly.
And oh, this is who I am. This is what it is. Look, it's here. And you tell them, no, it's not. You say, but look, it is here. And they get too endeared by the state of misery. So maybe that's what I was saying. You look at the state of misery, acknowledge its existence,
Right.
but it stops there. When it comes to the redemptive component, which is the humility to accept the ability to move forward, that's the matzah. Not only do you recognize it's there, but be endeared by it, find it cherished. That's where you indulge. That's where you connect. That's where you can really emphasize its presence, that redemptive quality, rather than getting too attached to the state of misery and failure, which we all have. It's okay.
Yeah.
You look at it, acknowledge it, and move on.
But also,
Yes.
even it's a recurring thing. Also, even in mourning, there's a time to mourn where you're supposed to. You sit and for 7 days.
Don't get stuck there.
But then then on to the next phase.
It's funny you say it, because the custom is that when a person gets up from Shiva, we actually say sternly,
Right.
get up, because it's quite often that people get comfortable in the state of mourning
Right.
and they want to stay there. It feels
Right.
good to just wallow
Right.
within the state of mourning. And the halacha is saying mourning is important.
Yes.
You have to mourn, you have to feel all those feelings. And when it comes time to move, you have to move.
Right.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, continue. However, etc. When you get to the paragraph which says that this Pesach offering that our forefathers used to eat is, what is it to remember? It's to remember the fact that God jumped over the Egyptian homes, etc. At this juncture, do not raise the cooked item which we have on our Seder plate, our shank bone or your chicken neck or whatever your custom is to have. Don't raise that up as you state the reason for the Pesach offering. So it does not give off the impression that this is an actual sanctified, bona fide offering, because that, of course, is forbidden to have an offering nowadays out of the temple area, actually outside the Jerusalem area, or when there's no temple. Well, maybe without a temple you can still do it, but we'll leave that aside. Okay, halakha 46. Yeah, be with me. Some commentary on the proper pronunciation of some of the words. So we're going to move through this part a little bit quickly. Halakha 46, because it's not really now a Gemara. It's just a couple comments on the proper pronunciation of various different words in the paragraph that is here in the Haggadah. You want to say something, Mayor?
I'm just gonna make a joke of saying that we're turning the page.
Oh yeah, we're turning the page, exactly. Okay, so it says the Nemar Lefanav Shira Chadasha Haleluka. This is what we say, which means, and we'll say before him. It's the closing paragraph. After we say in every generation, we have to see ourselves as if we left Egypt. Therefore, we have to laud, praise, and thank you. And we'll say before you, in the same way, you redeemed us, so shall you redeem us in the future. And we'll say before you a new song, Hallelujah. Yeah, this is the paragraph. So says the Alter Rebbe, the letter nun, which is in the word v'nemar, should be said b'segol. So it's v'nemar. And when you say v'nemar, the meaning will then be that the Jewish people will, or already did. Nemar means, and it was said. It was sung. So it will mean that the Jewish people and Moshe Rabbeinu already said this song at the Exodus from Egypt, which is the song at the sea, the Oz Yashim, which we say every morning. The Gam Yeshayim as well. There are those who say there are even those who say that in addition to the Oz Yashir, Moshe and the Jewish people actually said the entirety of Hallel. So V'nemar, it was said in the past tense. Yeah. I'll have to see by the Rebbe Zagada what the deal is. Okay, we'll have to see when we get to the Alter Rebbe's. When we get to the Haggadah itself, here it says to say Nemar. But if I remember correctly, and we'll see when we get to the Alter Rebbe's Haggadah, we don't have it here, where actually our version is to say Nemar, which he says not to say. Okay, let's continue. One shouldn't say the nun with a cholam, which would be v'noimar, right? V'noimar v'yei pirusha al gula asida. If you say v'noimar, then that would mean and we will say, rather than it was said. What?
I was looking at the English where I just glanced at it. I see none. What's up, none?
Okay, so listen carefully. I don't want to get lost track here. There's two ways. There's vowels, of course, in Hebrew are not in the actual words. They're in nikud. They're in like the punctual. They're in the dots that are not in the actual word. So you can have the same letters, different pronunciation, right? We had oni, right? So likewise, v'noimar or v'ne'emar. V'ne'emar means and it was said, which would mean we're talking about the song that was said at the sea. Or you could say v'noimar, which means and we will say in the future tense, changing either putting 3 dots under the nun or 1 dot in the top left of the nun. So says the Alter Rebbe, the proper way to say it is v'nemar with 3 segels. Again, when we get to the hour Haggadah, we'll see we don't do it this way. We do say v'nemar. But here the Alter Rebbe is saying not to say v'nemar, but rather to say v'nemar, which means that the song was said. Why? Because if you say v'nemar of the future, v'nemar, which means and it will be said, the pirusha al gula, see the second paragraph of 46, the meaning will be future, we will sing. In Cain, if so, shir chadash. You have to say a new song rather than shira chadasha. Shir chadash is in the masculine, new song. Shira chadasha, new song in the feminine. But lashon zachar in the masculine, right? Okay, we're going to see again. We're going to see how it's a little bit different when we get to the Alter Rebbe's Haggadah and the Rebbe's commentary. Okay, so what's the difference if it's male or female? New song. So says the Alter Rebbe, this is what the Medrash tells us. Kol hashira is nikar shira. All song is referred to as shira, lashon nekeva in the feminine. Ki chuasam, ki yoledes, shim tila, zachar, v'niftar mitzar haleda. V'achakach, kaizeres, v'yoledes betzar. Because all of our redemption, which brings about song, is like a woman who gives birth, and she's free of the pain of labor until she gives birth the next time. So kach so too, kol ha'geulos, all of the redemptions that the Jewish people have experienced so far, hayacharein golos v'tzaros, were followed by other exiles. So we were redeemed from Babylonia, but then we went to Roman exile. The Jews did well in Spain, and then they were thrown out of Spain. Right? So therefore, it's similar. It's akin to a woman's praise of, "Wow, the pains of labor are over. Till the next time." And therefore, that's the idea of the feminine song. But the future redemption, will be the complete redemption, followed by no pain and suffering. And therefore, the Tehillim says, we will sing to God a new song in the masculine. Song followed by no pain afterwards. And therefore, it says the Alter Rebbe, if you say v'noimar and we will sing to you, then you have to say we will sing to you in the masculine, shir chadash. And because we say shir chadash in the feminine, therefore it must be referring to a past song. And because it's a past song, therefore we should not say v'noimar, which means and we will say v'nemar and it was said. Is that clear? And therefore, but then later in the same paragraph, when we bless Hashem for being our Redeemer, where there we do make explicit reference to the future redemption, then you say, will praise to you a new song in the masculine. They're talking about the future time. Not to say shir chadasha in the feminine. So to be careful. If we're talking about if we're using feminine, that means we're talking about the past redemptions, and if we use past language. If you're speaking in the masculine, you're speaking about the future redemptions, then you speak in the future tense. And therefore, in the first paragraph, the first part of the paragraph, where it says, we sing to you a new song in the feminine, it therefore must be talking about the past, and therefore we say v'nemar, and we have sung to you, rather than v'nomar, and we will say for you. This idea of the feminine and the masculine is a very big Kabbalistic idea. And very briefly, since we like to include some Kabbalah here, so very briefly, we are aware of the 7 divine attributes, the emotional attributes, the lowest of which is, or the last of which is Malchus. I shouldn't say the lowest, but the last of which is Malchus, right? Malchus is the feminine dimension, and it is the projective dimension, quite physically. Female receives from the male and then produces a new child. So Malchus, which is responsible for creating all worlds, only does so with the power it receives from the attributes above it, from the masculine, which is Zo, the 6 emotions. Another model for this is Malchus, the feminine, is the power to project, to speak. So I have the ability to project, but what am I projecting? Well, I don't know, it depends on what I'm feeling. So my ability to project, the feminine, must receive first from the masculine, from my emotions, then it can project. Yeah. So because Malchus, the feminine, the projection, is dependent not on its own production, but on receiving, therefore, like the moon, it waxes and wanes, depending on how much projection ability it's been given. Because the moon only projects that which the sun gives it. Like Malchus, like the feminine, like the capacity to speak, and therefore waxes and wanes, and therefore its redemption is not a complete one. The masculine, which is the giver, the sun, the Zah, the emotions themselves, they're always in a mode of giving. And it's just a question of whether there's a recipient available, which is why, this is very quick, but I hope your time is all together, but this is why when we bless the new moon every month, we conclude by saying, and with Hashem's help, you'll restore the moon, that it too will light just like the sun. Why is that important? Who cares? Because there's a very deep meaning here. The meaning here is that the recipient, the feminine, which by the way is Jewish people, God the masculine, the Jewish people the feminine, us being feminine like the moon, recipients of the divine. The idea being that we will never lack. Us as recipients, being the moon, being Malchus, being the feminine, never lack, and thus incorporate that male component of a song that never ends, a redemption after which there's no exile, as the Medrash put it here. It was a little quick, but if we're familiar, we're familiar. I hope some idea. I'm sure this shouldn't be completely new to you.
No. I'm just
tying it all together a little.
The ending is a bit.
When Mashiach comes.
No, but I'm saying that like the last part of not needing the reception of light. I mean.
No, we do need the reception.
Right.
But the reception never stops.
Right.
It doesn't wax and wane.
Right.
And therefore, it has that masculine quality of never changing, and never diminishing.
It'll be eternally within us.
Eternally within, exactly.
Right.
It received so deeply that it becomes who we are.
Never withdrawn.
And thus never withdrawn.
Right.
So it's the redemption followed by no pain and suffering. The moon shines just like the sun. That's the prayer we say at the.
In unity, then.
There's
unity.
Yichud.
Right.
That's right. Absolute Yichud.
Heaven.
L'shem Yichud. Kuchabrichu Shechinte. Same idea. Kuchabrichu is the masculine, which always gives. Shechinte is the feminine, which receives. And we're trying to unify them so that the recipient never lacks.
Right.
That's the Shem Yichud Kuchabrichu Shechinte.
And it's never withdrawn.
That's the Shir Chadash, the new song in the masculine that never is followed by any sorrow. May it be without delay. God willing, tomorrow, maybe it'll take us to, tomorrow is a fast day.
Right.
So how appropriate is we're concluding with this idea of having a redemption followed by no destruction, preempting the mourning of destruction that we don't need to mourn. That's the message here. So how appropriate it is that the day before we're supposed to mourn in the temple, or ask Hashem that we don't mourn the temple. And we get to that point where it's redemption with, followed by no other. But exile plans are
Yeah.
that there probably won't be a class because we're going to have a longer davening. We'll do the chassidus before davening. There's no reason not to do chassidus before davening
Right.
without coffee. So we'll see how energetic we can be. Kidding. And then the Gemara class, this class, I don't think we'll have.
The prayer service at the same
You-
time.
It starts at 7. It's just going to go a little longer because there's slichas in it.
3 o'clock you eat.
Sorry.
3 o'clock wake up, you eat something and sleep.
If you'd like to wake up at 3 in the morning and eat, you're welcome to do so.
So Rabbi, you want to do the class tomorrow?
I don't think we'll be able to do the class after davening tomorrow, but let's just see.
Okay.
We'll see how we're doing. This is exile
How you're-
plans.
How you're feeling.
Yeah, well, we'll just see what time it is and where if everybody has to go or stay. We'll see what's going on there. But otherwise, we'll continue on Wednesday with Hashem himself. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
All the
No
very best.
Tehillim.
Shech na Hashem. Sorry?
No Tehillim.
No Tillim.
No, Tachman.
No Tachnan. What do you mean no Tachnan? It's a fast day. Extra Tachnan.
Extra?
Tomorrow's a fast day. There'll be
3 to
slichot
3.
tomorrow.
It's the 17th of time.
Tomorrow's the fast day, so it's going to be longer Tachnan tomorrow.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's the first
Okay,
breach,
wonderful
the
day.
first breach in the